everyone. My name is Smilin Observer, and I'm going to do a series of Reddit readings for you. I know it's been a very long time since I've done one, so I'm going to start by saying Happy Halloween 2016, and I'm going to tell you a quick story about when I was working at a hotel. You see, I worked at a hotel many years ago. I was at the front desk talking with my coworker, and then I noticed the sounds of people working in the kitchen. I heard dishes being cleaned. I heard the bustle of movement that was signified that someone was in the kitchen doing something. And as I said, I worked there. In fact, I painted that kitchen. I cleaned the ventilation, and I removed it, and I removed the dishes racks, the shelves on the walls, and I painted everything. I painted behind all of those areas, and I painted the ceiling, and then I put everything back, and it was quite the endeavor. I said that because I want you to know that I am aware of every nook and cranny in this kitchen. So if someone is back there cleaning and washing stuff, I know where they are and what's going on. I have a pretty good picture of what the kitchen looks like. And I kept noticing it. So I broke off my conversation with my coworker to go and check it out, because I knew the kitchen ladies weren't there. When you're cooking for a hotel full of people, you have to come in pretty early in the morning, which means they went to bed pretty early that night or that afternoon. So when I heard the noise and I knew they weren't there, because it was close to maybe 8 or 9 o'clock, I decided to go and investigate. And all the way up until the point that I opened the door, I heard this busy background noise. And when I went in to the kitchen area, I had to walk inside and turn on the lights. And when I turned on the lights, the kitchen was empty. It was vacant. And it was clean. I already knew what was happening. So I turned off the lights. I closed the door. And I walked back to the front desk. The sound was gone. And I went to tell my coworker what happened. But before I could say anything, she cut me off. She cut me off and she said, "I don't want to know, because I don't want that idea in my head." This is a true story that happened to me. This isn't something that I'm reading off of Reddit. Thank you everyone for watching, deciding to click. I hope you're having an enjoyable Halloween. Hopefully you've gotten your fill of candy. Hopefully you have some healthier options. And hopefully this reading that I'm doing will relax you. Maybe you'll get some tingles from it. Or maybe it'll just cause the hair on your neck to stand up. we'll see. I'm going to start by reading a story. There's a story posted on Reddit by Kim Jong Funk. Redditor Kim Jong Funk. And this is what he said. When I was in elementary school, I shared a queen-size bed with my older sister and our family dog, a mutt that looked like a short-haired lassie, which would sleep at the foot of our bed every night. When I was about 6 years old, I woke up one night around midnight and saw a dark figure standing at the foot of the bed. The figure was entirely in black, without any eyes or a face. I tried to wake up my sister, but she just rolled over and went back to sleep. My sister must have accidentally kicked the dog, because the dog woke up and raised her head and started growling at the figure at the foot of the bed. The growling then woke up my sister, and she saw the figure and started screaming. When my parents came into the room and turned the light on, nothing was there. To this day, both my sister and I are adamant that we saw a ghost or otherworldly demon in our room. We know we aren't crazy because the dog saw it too. Wow, how's that for a surprise wake up? This story comes from the True Lord Humongous. Redditor, the True Lord Humongous. Not creepy, but kind of cool. My mother split and transplanted a rose bush from my grandfather's farm about 40 years ago. It took, but never bloomed. At that point, she only kept it because it grew into the fence nicely and kept us kids from climbing it. My grandfather died about 5 years after. She transplanted the plant. And that spring, it bloomed red roses. A few years after that, my grandmother died. And the spring after it, it bloomed white roses. These are the only 2 years that it has ever bloomed. And that was interesting. Who knows, maybe it was a message to them that everything would be fine. But who can really tell? Redditor Fox Race reports, my mother's favorite animal was the hummingbird. Last year, shortly after my mom passed away, a hummingbird came right up and looked at me as I was on my way to my car to go to work, like a foot away, and just checked me out for a while and flew off to do hummingbird things. Once I got into my car, I broke down. I just sat there in the driver's seat and cried. I'd like to think my mom was somehow checking up on me. I know it's silly, but for that moment, I felt like she wasn't gone, and she was still there, watching over me. Wow, what a powerful story. What a powerful sentiment. Here's something that I would like to share at this juncture. I've always heard of weird happenings occurring when a loved one passes away, and having premonitions and experiences of this sort. And this one involves myself. It's something that I've probably told maybe one or two people. The day that I would get the call that my mother had passed away, I was at work. I was going about my daily routine when I suddenly had a idea pop into my head. And this idea was a picture. And it was a picture of my mother in a casket. And as I began to feel this way, I shook it off because I refused to think like that. And the reason I refused to think like that is because my mother had lived 10 years past a stroke. And I prayed for her relentlessly the first time she had the stroke. And as I prayed for her, I really felt like God was there. And that He could feel my pain. And that He heard my prayer. And I prayed. And then, as I proceeded to work, continued to work, the reason why I was working so very hard and relentless is because I wanted to go home and spend 2 weeks with her. I was going to drive all the way back to South Carolina from Mississippi, where I lived at the time, and I was going to spend 2 weeks with her for Christmas. And during that 2 weeks, I was going to assess whether or not I needed to move back in with her. And as I continued to work, much later in the day, or a couple of hours into my work shift, I had another premonition that my mom had passed. Again, I shook it off, I shrugged it off, because I didn't want to think like that. And then I went home, and by the time I got home, my cell phone was dead. And so when I got home, I plugged it in. I plugged it in so that it could charge up. And then I went to sleep. And when I woke up, I picked up my phone and I saw that my cousin had messaged me. And it was a cousin that doesn't normally contact me or call me. So I contacted them. And she told me the awful news that my mother had passed. I was so distraught. I was so upset. I began to pack my things and I got into my car and I started driving. I called my boss on the road and let them know what was happening and what I was doing. And they all understood and told me if I needed anything, they would help me. But that was the longest drive to South Carolina I had ever driven. Those 10 hours were the worst of my life. All I did was cry and wonder if things could be different. But it was not lost on me that this premonition came the same day that she had her heart attack. And I wonder if that was just a comforting message from God, helping me to understand what was happening. But I don't know. It's just something interesting that happened to me that I cannot explain. next story comes from Redditor Crocker321. I was a rookie cop when my brother committed suicide. Let me stop right here and say something. I appreciate our boys in blue. It's a difficult thing that they do. I can relate to them because I am a Marine, and as an active duty Marine, I've faced hatred from the public, as they all lumped us all in the same category. But I appreciate our boys in blue, our ladies and our women as well. It's not easy to be a police officer, and what they do is very commendable. But let me continue with this story. I was a rookie cop when my brother committed suicide. He was one of my older siblings, but we were very close. He died in another state, and I had a lot of guilt then about not recognizing the signs. His remains were in bad shape by the time he was discovered, so it was a closed coffin service. About a week after he died, I was back at work one night, and my partner and I see a pimp pistol whipping one of his girls. I jump out, and the pimp sees me, and the foot chase was on. I was running after him, gun in hand, and he cuts through a narrow corridor under a building that leads to a courtyard in the middle. Right before I reach the courtyard, I hear, "It's okay," in my dead brother's voice. I hit the courtyard, and the guy is against the side, pointing a gun at my head, and squeezes the trigger twice. I froze for a millisecond, and then started beating him in the head with my revolver. To this day, I don't know why I didn't just shoot him. I cuff him, and then walk him back to the street, and find my partner. I tell my partner about him squeezing the trigger, but not the voice I heard. We unload the gun, the 22 revolver, or a 32 revolver. We unload the gun right there, and the bullets have strike marks on them. I take the gun to the lab for testing. I tell the tech the story. He puts the 2 bullets in with the strike marks, and he shoots them into the test tank. Both bullets fired. Wow. That was a close one. I am so glad you made it out alive there, Crocker321. I'm very happy for you. That was very close. This story comes from Charlie Baumhauser. Redditor Charlie Baumhauser. We used to live in a battered women's and children's shelter when I was young, because my father was looking for us. Ugly divorce. Alabama gave him custody. Mom took us to Washington. One night, I looked in the mirror and saw a hairy demon looking back at me. I screamed and cried and ran to get my mom, who assured me it was a normal mirror. But that night, a kind-looking man that I can only describe as a ghost appeared at the end of my bed. He was there all night, but gone when I woke up the next morning. Then the next night, and the was there every night for 4 months. We never talked. He never moved, just stood guard. Then one night, he woke me up from my sleep, and I'll never forget how surprised I was, because I'd never seen him move or talk. He said, "He's coming. Get out now." So we packed up the car and left to a hotel for the night. The next morning, we went back to find out someone had broken in and gone room to room looking for someone. I never saw him again after that. That was amazing. I do believe in guardian angels. I believe God sends his angels to watch after us when we otherwise can't watch out for ourselves. I could tell you a story of when I was younger and I woke up to find someone in white sitting near my bed. And all of a sudden, before I could see his face, he changed. And he was wearing a red shirt. And he looked like a friend of mine from high school. And then, in the next instant, he was completely gone. I do believe that was an angel sent to keep Smilin observer safe while he slept. Let's move on to the next story. So, here's another story for you. When I was a kid, I was in bed and I was waking up. I was in between being awake and being asleep. And I was looking up at the wall ceiling. And I could see the sun had started to rise and the room was starting to get brighter. And then all of a sudden, the room got a couple of shades darker, like a shadow was cast over the room. And as I lay there, unable to move, it felt like a great weight fell onto me. And when I woke up in the morning, I was sick. When I woke up that morning, I had one of the worst migraines of my life. And I know because I'm 40 now, and I've had 3 that I can remember that was severely bad. And that was probably the first. Now, I believe in the Bible. I believe in the Word of God. I believe in God. And I realize most of you don't. But listen to this. The Bible tells us that Jesus went throughout Judea and throughout Samaria, and he performed many miracles, many notable, undeniable miracles. And many of those miracles were healing. He would heal people. He would raise the dead. He would give sight to the blind. People who had never walked in their lives received the power to walk. People who had never seen before, all of a sudden, could see clearly. And all it took was a touch from Jesus. Now, Jesus met a woman, and the Bible says that she was bowed over, meaning she was hunched over. She walked like she was trying to touch her toes, like she was bending over trying to touch her toes. And the Bible says that she could in no wise lift herself up. When Jesus met her, he rebuked the spirit that caused this condition. So, what I'm trying to get at is, many times when people are sick, this could be an evil entity making them sick. This could be some oppressive spirit that's come to inflict this thing upon them. This unclean spirit that gets some kind of kick out of affecting people in this way. And we know that it was an unclean spirit because once Jesus rebuked that spirit, the woman was able to stand herself up. She was able to walk around just fine. We know that once he walked into the temple, he walked into the synagogue, and sitting in the synagogue, sitting in this holy place, sitting in this place where people come to commune with God, was a man with an unclean spirit. And when Jesus got there, he began to get upset, and he got upset with Jesus. And he began to tell him, "What have we to do with thou son of, what did he say? We know who thou art. Thou art the Christ." So what was he saying? I can't remember exactly what he was saying. But he began to say things like, "Have you come to torture us before the time?" He got really bent out of shape. And Jesus had to cast that unclean spirit out. He didn't cast the man out. He cast the unclean spirit out. And when he did that, the man was free from this thing that was afflicting him. Now, I'm not saying that to say that all people that go to church, something's wrong with them, because clearly that's not the case. What I'm saying is, there are spiritual entities out there, evil spirits, unclean spirits, that try to affect our lives, that try to affect us in ways and cause us to do things that we wouldn't normally do. So we have to protect ourselves from these things. It's really serious. I wish people would take it more seriously. Now, the reason why, especially here in America, that you don't see these things is because in America, we take people like that and we put them in insane asylums. And this is how they deal with them. They're insane. We can't, medicine won't cure them. Let's just put them in a padded room where he can't hurt himself, where she can't hurt herself. And the problem is not necessarily that these people are insane. It's that these people are being affected by some unclean spirit, and they need to be freed from those unclean spirits. But it's just a thought. And to kind of prove this to you, or whether you can take this with a grain of salt, I heard a story about a maintenance man. He was a maintenance man, and his company was called to an insane asylum to do some mechanical work. And he didn't tell anybody that he was a preacher. He didn't tell anybody that he was a man of God. He was just a maintenance man. And he came to this place. And he came to do his job. And while he was working, he heard somebody knocking on the door above him. And he looked up. And the man inside the padded room was standing there in front of the glass, knocking on the door. And he looked at the man, and he said to the maintenance man, "Hello, preacher." How did that man inside that padded room know that the man outside that door was a preacher? How did he know that that man was a man of God? No doubt that unclean spirit inside the man knew who he was. Just like that unclean spirit knew who Jesus was when he walked into the temple. So, these things are real. And this is why I don't play with Ouija boards. I read the stories to you guys, but I will not play with them. I refuse to play with them because I don't want to open myself up to possession of any sort by these evil things. I have not heard one good positive story come from a Ouija board. So, if you play with them, my advice to you would be to stop. But remember, it's your choice. You have to choose, and you have to choose wisely. This next story comes from Redditor Armantes. Middle of the night, sleeping. I hear a sound like someone is taking a paperclip from my desk and throwing it against the wall, and it bounces across the desk. I wake up to this noise, turn on the light right by my bed as I sit up. I look over and see nothing. Weird. As I'm ready to lay back down, my 20-pound steel gumball machine falls from the shelf over my head, directly onto my pillow, where my head was not 30 seconds earlier. I flip out and scramble out of my bed. I am totally taken by surprise. As I stand up, I feel something under my feet. A paperclip. I put the murderous gumball machine on the floor, the paperclip back on my desk, and crawl into the safety of my comforter. Nothing like that happened again. The shelf was a bookcase over headboard that was not only a foot taller than my bed. It probably wouldn't have killed me. Just would have damaged my face, I'm guessing. But I was also 10 years old, so, there's that lack of forethought for you. This last and final story comes from Jade Legume. Redditor Jade Legume. When I was growing up, I was tight with the daughter of my dad's cousin. So my second cousin, I suppose. Her name was Lisa. We grew much closer as teenagers. Too close, really. Anyway, we wised up a little and went our separate ways when it was time for college. A few years passed, and I moved on. One night, I got up to go pee. Didn't bother to turn on the lights. I was washing my hands, and I glanced in the mirror, and there she was. Lisa was standing in the doorway behind me. I heard the echo of her voice. She told me that she still loved me and always would. She then turned and walked out of my sight. I stood holding onto the sink for a moment, my heart pounding pounding in my chest. I calmed myself down and decided it had just been a dream. I tried to go back to bed. My pillow smelled like her. She could have been in the room seconds ago. I lay back down, and as I drifted off to sleep, I felt her warm, familiar presence against my back. The next morning, there was no sign of her. No scent, no indent on the covers. I wrote it off as a dream. Then I got a call from my mom later that day. She told me Lisa had died a few days earlier. She had been killed by her boyfriend. He got drunk and angry, and he hit her, and that was that. I guess she stopped by to see me one last time, to say goodbye before she moved on. Here's to you, Lisa. 20 years later, and you're still the only woman I truly loved. Wow. What a powerful story. Another loved one stopping by to show everyone just one last message that should be encouraging. Shouldn't be anything to be frightened of. But yet, they stand in our minds as an omen of sorts, a symbol of good things to come, a symbol of something special, a reminder that life is fragile and that one day we must all eventually move on. Because there's one thing for sure, we can't stay here. I would like to thank you all for stopping by my channel to listen, to relax, and I hope that these stories give you some sort of encouragement or open your eyes to some sort of closure you've received that you didn't realize was closure. Be it a guardian angel, be it a loved one saying goodbye one last time before crossing over. And I hope that you would find comfort and relaxation from these stories, and that these stories do away with your fear. Because if there's anything I know about fear, it is this: fear hath torment, but to the answer to fear is love. Love casts out fear. Perfect love casts out fear. Once again, thank you. Happy Halloween and good night.